Oh, hi, how you doing? I hope you're doing well. I hope you're keeping safe in this time of madness. And I really wish that I was there in front of all of you folks. But I think it's probably a good idea that you're watching this online and I'm making this online. Especially for the Nashua Public Library. And thank you very much, Nashua Public Library, for having me do this. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to tell you some stories. Some of them are brand new to me this year. These, with all this not working going on, I've actually been able to learn a lot more stories than I normally would in a year. In fact, I've learned probably as many new stories so far this year, and it's not even July yet. I've learned more stories this year than I have in the last 2 years combined. So it's kind of cool that I'm doing this. Which means I can tell even more stories to people like you. And I hope you like this one. I do. It's about Cupid. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Did I spoil it for you? Darn it. Once upon a time, a very long time ago, there was an old man. Not Cupid, no. And this old man, he was very kind. People liked him a lot. And he was also a poet. He loved writing. He loved words, how they sounded, how they flowed across the page when he wrote. He would write about the wind talking to the tops of the trees, keeping secrets from the birds. He would write about the water running down over the rocks in brooks and streams. He would write about many things. He'd write about politics. He'd write about life, with all of its pitfalls and all of its pleasures. Well, one day, the old man was sitting in his little home with a big fire burning in the fireplace. He had a long poker, and on the end of the poker there was an apple. He was toasting it on the fire. There was a pot of tea on the shelf next to him that was brewing. And he was looking out of the window. Like today, it was raining. It was pouring with rain. The wind wrapped itself around the house and shook it a little bit. The shutters shook. The windows rattled. Even the door banged a little bit. I would hate to think of anyone being caught out in that weather today, he thought to himself. It would be awful. I'd be soaked through to the skin. He turned the apple around on the poker, and then he heard a knock at the door. Oh, who could that be at such a late hour in such awful weather? He stood up and shuffled over to the door. And when he got to the door and opened it, he didn't see anybody there. But as he turned and looked down, he saw that there was a young child there. And they were naked. Well, they weren't quite naked. I mean, they had a bow over one arm and a quiver of arrows over the other. But other than that, they were naked. What are you doing, child? Come on inside, come on inside. The old man ushered him. Go and stand by the fire. I shall go and get some towels and blankets for you. Go on, warm yourself off, dry yourself off. And the old man went and got some blankets and some towels. And he helped the young child dry himself off. What on earth are you doing here? He set him on his lap. What on earth are you doing here? Rubbing his arms, rubbing his back, and rubbing the rain out of his hair. What are you doing out on such a late evening with such terrible weather? Now, I like to be out. The boy looked up at the old man. I like to be out and playing and stuff. Well, I'm afraid your bow and arrow must be ruined. It looks like your arrows are all different colours and all the colours are bleeding together. No, they won't be ruined. They'll be fine, said the little boy. He jumped down and ran around the room. Who are you? Oh, my name's Cupid. Cupid? Yes, my name's Cupid. Well, I'd never thought I would see Cupid. Well, the boy picked up his bow and flexed the wood. You see? My bow's fine. And then he twanged the string, and then the string was tight. And then he picked up one of those arrows and notched it into the bow and then let it fly. And it flew right at the old man and hit him in his heart. Cupid's arrow of love. The old man fell over backwards. You wicked child, how dare you shoot me? I'm in the arrow. Well, the boy looked up and said, oh, look, the rain has stopped. And the moon, it's full up in the sky. And without a thank you or anything else, the young boy opened up the door and ran out. Just vanished into the night. "You wicked child, I shall write about you. I shall warn others about you. I shall. But Cupid didn't stick around to listen. He ran off with his bow and arrow. And he hid up in trees and parks and would shoot willy-nilly at people passing by, and they would be struck by the arrows of love, just like the old man was, just like the poet. It seems that he had written poems about love, and he did write poems about Cupid to warn others about Cupid's darts, his arrows, and how they hurt, and how they cause sometimes great joy. And the old man realized over the years that passed that he did have a love, a great love of words, even greater than he ever imagined he had before. But it seems these people didn't listen to the poet. And there have been many poets since who've also written about Cupid. People still don't listen. He would hang up in theatres and shoot arrows down at the audience and the actors, not caring who he hit. He would pretend to be friends to young people, and then when they weren't looking, least expecting, he would shoot them too, with his arrows of love. To some, like I said, it hurt, and to others, they fared much better. But Cupid is still out there, shooting his arrows. Your grandparents were struck by Cupid's arrows, and your parents too were struck by Cupid's arrows. You should ask them what it felt like, whether it hurt or not, and whether it was worth it. And that's the story of the naughty boy. The end. Some of Hans Christian stories, they're very puzzling, but doing this festival that I'm doing with Hans Christian Andersen stories is quite amazing, because it's allowed me to listen to a lot of stories that I would never have heard otherwise. And they're all Hans Christian Andersen stories, and they're amazing. They're very deep and dark, and some of them are quite silly, but they're good, they're fun. Have a look at them, visit them. The next story I'm going to tell you comes from Finland, and it's kind of a long story, but not too long. Not too long. So if you're watching this online, hit the pause button if you need to go to the bathroom or get a glass of water or a cup of tea or coffee, and then come back. And then hit the pause button again so it starts to play. I guess I'd be hitting the play button, right? As in so many of these stories, there was an old man and an old woman. They weren't that old though. And the old man, they were farmers, both of them were farmers. And the man, he was a worrywart. Do you know what I mean by that? He always worried about things. He was always concerned about what would happen, what would go on, and what wouldn't happen and wouldn't go on. He was worried about everything. And so he decided to go and see an elder in the village, this medicine woman, if you like. She was a sati. And she sat him down and said, "Everything will be all right. Your sons, you'll have 3 of them. And when they are born, you will plant a tree for each of them. And you will name those trees after you name your sons. They will have the same name. And then, when they get to marry, they will cut the trees down, and the trees will point to where their sweethearts are." And so the farmer, thank you, and his heart was lightened, because he didn't have to worry about having children. Farmers like to have children to help around the farm. I mean, that's, just one of those things. And so eventually his wife became pregnant, and they had 1, 2, 3 sons. The first son they called Oni, and he was a fine young fella. The second son, he was called Arnie, and he too was a fine fella. And the third one, he was called Hans, and he also was a fine lad. And they all knew different things, liked different things. They were very, very individual boys. Well, when Oni was old enough, he thought it was time for him to be married. And he thought, well, if I'm going to get married, then my brothers should get married too. They're almost old enough. They're pretty much old enough. They're old enough. And so he went to his father and said, "Father, I want to get married. Can we cut our trees down?" Now, these trees, which had been planted when the boys were born, had started off so small and slender. They were now great trees, huge trees that rose up into the sky. And the father said, "Yes, you can cut the trees down. And wherever they point will be where your sweetheart is." Now, Here's the thing. Oni, he was madly in love with the rich merchant's daughter who lived over there. And Oni was really good at cutting down trees. So when he swung the axe, that tree fell down and pointed exactly to that rich merchant's daughter's house. Now, it was Oni's turn. It was Arne's turn. Now it was Arne's turn. And he knew how to cut down trees too. And when he cut down his tree, he made sure that his pointed right towards the rich farmer's house. Because inside that house, there was a young lady that he was absolutely smitten over. Oh, if I can marry her, I'll be so happy. And then there was Hans. And Hans, he didn't really feel that he wanted to get married. He was like, well, I don't know if I want to get married. I kind of like, you know, being me on my own. But he cut down a tree, and when the tree fell, it fell and pointed to the forest. And his brothers, they laughed at him. Oh, where are you going to go? Are you going to find a bear for a wife, or maybe a wolf or a fox? He's going to marry a fox. He's going to come back with a bear wife or a wolf. Oh, it's going to be good for him. Hans just shrugged his shoulders and made his way off into the woods. The other two boys made their way to the girls that they liked. But Hans walked, trod through the forest, stepped over roots, ducked under branches, pushed bushes out of the way, following the direction of that fallen tree. And on and on and on he went. He didn't come to any sort of lodging the first day. And so he found two great roots that came out of the ground, and he built himself like a little cover out of branches and leaves and ferns that were there. And he spent the night in the forest. And then the next morning he got up bright and early, and off he went again, on and on and on and on. And he still didn't come to any lodging. And then, after he'd spent another night in the forest, he got up early and he walked. He didn't walk too far, and then he came across this cottage. And he walked up to the windows and peered in through all of the windows. But they were filthy, they were disgustingly dirty, even like rubbing them from the outside. There was still dirt on the inside that he couldn't see through, other than strange shapes and shadows. So he went to the door and knocked on the door. There was no answer. He knocked on the door again. No answer. Hello? Is anybody here? He opened the door a bit more and stepped into the house. Hello, he called. And then he saw there was a table. There was a table right there in this room. It must have been the kitchen. He saw there was a sink there and there were cupboards and a great kitchen table. And on top of this table was a little tiny mouse. And the mouse was sitting there, washing its whiskers. It looked up at Hans when he walked in. And Hans said, huh, great. Come all this way to find a house empty apart from this mouse. And the mouse looked up at Hans and said, what is wrong with finding a mouse? You can talk? Well, yes, so can you. Well, yes, but you're a mouse and I'm a human being. It makes no matter. You look sad. Oh, this is so hard. And Hans peered in. And he saw that there was a great kitchen table there. And on top of the kitchen table was a mouse. A little, tiny, grey mouse. I've come all this way only to find a mouse. What's wrong with finding a mouse? You can talk, and so can you, but you're a mouse and I'm a human being. Well, does that make any difference? I can talk, and so can you. You look sad. What's wrong? Well, he told the mouse what had happened about his brothers cutting down the trees that went to their sweethearts and how he had cut his tree down and fallen, pointed towards the forest. And I'm seeking a bride. Well, you could marry me if you want, but you're a mouse. How can I marry a mouse? You do have very beautiful blue eyes. Why, thank you. She stood up a little straighter. You would be fun to have as a companion. You think so? I think so. I think you should marry me. Well, maybe I will. It's nice to meet you. And he thanked her very much and he made his way back home. He had found his bride. Now when he got back home, another 3 days later, 6 days after he'd left, He and his brothers were there. He and his brothers were all together, and they were talking about their potential brides, their future betrothed. And they were asking Hans about his girl. Well, she's very nice, actually, brothers, father, mother. She's got grey hair and these beautiful, beautiful blue eyes, and she's got this cute little nose. Grey hair? You're going to marry an old woman? I don't think she's an old woman. But he didn't say any more than that. Well, the next morning, as the brothers sat down at the table for breakfast, their mother said, "Now, children, I want you to find your brides again, and I want you to go and ask them to make some bread, and bring that bread back to me, okay? Can you do that?" "Yes," they said. So the two older brothers went off, and Hans went off. How is a mouse going to make bread? This is what was going through Hans's mind as he made his way through the forest. But he saw a nice little wild flower, and so he picked it. It was a small little purple thing about this big, and by the time he got to the little cottage and knocked on the door and opened it up, the mouse was sitting there on the table. "Oh, hello. Have you come to marry me? Or do you have a task?" "How did you know?" He handed the mouse the little tiny blue flower. I found this in the forest, and I thought you might like it." Well, she picked it up and smelt it. "And what is the task?" she said. "My mother has asked each of our future brides to bake a loaf of bread." "You look so sad." "Well, you're a mouse. How can you bake bread?" "I can bake bread. You just watch." And she called out in her mouse language. And 100 mice came into that room. Now, Hans wasn't a scaredy cat, right? He was a kind of tough kid. He'd grown up on a farm. Things like mice and rats didn't scare him. Bats he was fine with. But when you have 100 mice suddenly storm into a room and they're all next to your feet, and you know that you can't tread on any of them because they're related to this mouse who you might be marrying, he just stood there, breathing as calmly as he could, with 100 mice around the floor of this room. And she spoke mousey speak to them. And they flew off. They all left. "What did you say to them?" "Well, I asked them to find the finest, most beautiful flower that they could find and bring it back here. And we're going to make a loaf of bread. And I want you to set the stove and get it going. There's wood out back, and you can find the matches in the drawer over there." And so he went outside and gathered the wood and stuck it in the stove and got the flames going in the oven. And they started to talk. They talked for a long time, and then the mice started to come back. They were all carrying little tiny grains of the finest flour that they had found. They all washed themselves off, and then they all put their flour into a big mixing bowl, and they added all the ingredients that you need to make flour. Salt, yeast, all those good things, water, oil, and they all started to mix it up. And it was mixed, and it rose, and they mixed it more, and it rose more, and they broke it down, and it rose even more, and then the oven was perfect temperature, and they put that dough in, and it grew into this most perfect loaf of bread. It smelt so good. Now he and his mouse bride had been talking this whole time, chatting about all sorts of different things. Then she pointed to the drawer where he got the matches. There was linen in there, and he wrapped the bread up in the linen and thanked her so much for the loaf of bread, and then made his way back home. The mother was waiting to taste Hans's bread. Well, not his bread, but the mouse bride's bread. And she'd already tapped the loaves of his brother's loaves, and she'd also torn a piece off and eaten it. And Hans went over, even though these pieces of bread were now 3 days old, they were still good. It still sounded good, and he tried it, and it was good. Put some butter on it, tasted even better, because bread always tastes good with butter. And then she tapped Hans's loaf. She smiled. "It sounds so wonderful," she said. And she tore the crust off. In England, we call the crust the knobby. And she tore the knobby off, and she bit into it, and it was really good. And then the brothers and the father, they tried that loaf of bread as well. And they all decided, the brothers reluctantly, that that was the best bread they'd ever tried. Best bread they'd ever eaten. They were a bit jealous of Hans. Well, the next day as they were sitting down to breakfast, finishing off the loaves of bread with lashings of marmalade, the mother said to them once more, "I need a task. You need to go to your potential brides, and you need to ask them to make some fabric." And so they all set off. Now, Hans, he really enjoyed the company of the mouse. And that day when he left to go and find her in the forest, he ran and skipped and he collected more and more flowers. He had quite a substantial bouquet for a mouse. And he knocked on the door and opened it and he laid them down at the mouse's feet and she picked them up and she smelt them and she said they were the most delicious smelling flowers that she'd ever smelt. And thank you very much. But you still look sad. What is wrong? Well, my mother's asked me to ask you if you can make some cloth. But why do you look sad? But you're a mouse. How can a mouse make cloth? I made bread, didn't I? You certainly did. And she called out in a mousy speak again. And those 100 mice came back in. There was Hans, being calm and collected, with 100 mice all over the floor, climbing up onto the table. And she spoke to them. And when they left, he asked her what she had said. I was asking them to find the finest flax. And they came back with the finest flax. And in the kitchen, they spun the finest flax into the finest thread. But then she took all of that thread into another room, where there was a loom. Now, I don't know if you know how you make fabric, but you make lots of strings going down, and then you have a shuttle that goes between, they're like kind of like this, right? And then they go, and then the fibers go like this, and then the thread comes back, and then they go like this, and the thread goes back. Well, that's not quite what happened in the loom in the other room. The mouse, she took that thread in her mouth, and she jumped through the threads. And then she ran all the way back. Backwards and forwards, and then they'll push the piece of wood to make sure it's nice and tight. And then she would keep running backwards and forwards, and then the wood, making it tight backwards and forwards, pulling it tight, making the material strong. And then, when she finished that piece of material, which wasn't a small piece, it was a huge piece. Although Hans didn't know this, she folded it up and put it into a nutshell, a walnut shell, and sealed it. And then she came out of the room, and she smiled at her future husband and said, "Here you are. This is it. This is all the material that I have. It'll be plenty," she said. "Go, give it to your mother." "Thank you," he said. And he was very grateful for this mouse, making the bread and making this material, even if it wasn't very much. And so he leant down onto the table and he nudged his nose against hers and scratched her behind the ears, and she liked that. "So maybe next time you come, we'll be married." "Maybe," he said with a smile. "I look forward to our next visit." And he left, and he made his way home. His brothers, they'd already shown the material that their brides were made, these great pieces of cloth. The eldest, her wife, the material was kind of rough. It was a nice piece of cloth, but it was rough. Now the middle boy, his future wife, she had made a softer material, but it wasn't well made, and there were gaps in it, there were holes in it. And when you held it up to the light, you could see where there were. It wasn't very well made at all. "What, Hans, where's yours?" He handed the nutshell to his mother, and he looked at his father as she cracked it open, and he saw his father's face. His eyes widened, his mouth opened, and Hans turned to look as she pulled out foot after foot after foot after foot of this material. 5 feet of cloth. And it was the softest, the finest, the most durable, the strongest fibre, the strongest cloth that any of them had seen. The brothers again were very jealous. Who is this strange bride that's in the woods? Who is she? How is it that she can make such wonderful bread and such wonderful cloth? People in the woods aren't that capable of making things such as this. Or were they? Well, the next morning, the father spoke to the boys. "Well, lads, in a few days, it's going to be Midsummer's Eve. And our family has had a tradition that when we get married on Midsummer's Eve. So I want you to go and find your brides and bring them back here, and on Midsummer's Eve you will all be married. It'll be a joint wedding." And so off they went. And Hans, smile on his face, he's going to marry the little mouse that he had so much fun with. And off he went, through the forest. He picked a much larger bouquet of flowers this time. For a mouse, it might have been a little bit too much, but he was so overjoyed that he's going to have his mouse companion. And so he came into the house and he set down the flowers, and she ran amongst them and she smelt them, and they were wonderful. And she said, "Have you come to marry me?" "Yeah, I have." "No task then?" "No." "Well, if I'm going to be married, then I want to travel in style." "Okay, but I just walked here." "It's all right, I've got it sorted." And she called out in a mousy language. And a few mice came into the room, but 4 great white rats came into the room. And she spoke to them in the mouse language, and they ran outside. And Hans reached down and picked his mouse bride up. And she was so tiny and delicate, her heart, he could feel her heart beating as he held her. Pa, 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 pa. Mice have very fast heartbeats. And then they went outside. And he saw outside the 4 white rats. Except they weren't just running around, they were tied up to a burnut, which had been made into a carriage. Little wheels and everything. I mean, Hans couldn't travel, and it was way too small. "This is for you to travel?" "Yes, it is." And so he bent down and set her inside the little carriage. And they made their way through the woods, back home. Back to Hans's home. Now, when they're almost back at Hans's village, they have to cross this bridge that goes over the river. Now, the river was kind of a wide, deep river, and it was fast, always rushing by. Now, the bridge was wide and it was flat. There weren't any sides to the bridge because a lot of trade was done in this village. And if there were 2 sets of animals crossing, like donkeys or carrying a whole bunch of wool, then the bridge had to be wide enough for them to pass each other. Not only that, there were no walls there because the bundles of wool the walls would stop them. So they started crossing this bridge. This is a bridge that Hans had crossed 100 times before. And he's looking down at his mousy bride being pulled in her burr nut carriage by the 4 white rats. And he was starting to think, what are my brothers going to say about this? What are my parents going to say about this? I'm marrying a mouse. Just then he looked up and he saw there was a boy coming the other way. And this boy was, he was the kind of kid that always had this look on his face and big shoulders, walking along. That was his way of saying hello to Hans, and Hans was like, "Hey." And this guy's like walking along, and he suddenly saw the carriage, the tiny little carriage and the rats. He was like, "You're a bit big for baby toys, aren't you?" And he stepped forward and he kicked the rats and the carriage into the river, and under the bridge they went. "Hans, look, what have you done?" And he ran to the other side of the bridge to see if they would come out on the other side, but he didn't see them. He turned round to have words with that boy, but the boy had vanished. He ran to the edge of the river again. He looked down the bank to see if they'd come out at the bank, and then he heard this sound, and he looked across to the other side of the bridge, and there was these 4 white horses, these beautiful white horses, and this gorgeous carriage that came out of the river. What the whack? Where's my bride? He turned to look in the water again. This woman that was in the carriage, she was young, she had dark skin, beautiful dark skin, blue eyes. And she smiled at him and she said, "Are you going to walk the rest of the way like you have through the forest, or will you ride with me now?" And "What are you talking about? Do you not recognize me?" This woman's hair was grey. Her eyes were blue. He walked up to her and looked into her eyes, and he knew that it was his mouse bride. How come, this, no, he was crazily confused. He didn't know what was going on. "Come on in," she said. And she helped him up into the carriage, and she took the reins, and the horses galloped as Hans told her where to go. And as they made their way, last part of the journey to Hans's family home, she told him that she had once been a princess, still was a princess. Her parents had died a long time ago. But this witch had been jealous of her, so she had turned everyone in the castle into mice and rats. The spell would only be broken if someone was to choose to marry her, and to threaten her life with water. And so that young boy that had come across the bridge, that bully, he had kicked the carriage into the water. He had threatened her life with water. And because Hans was going to marry this mouse bride, the spell was broken. Hans's brothers couldn't believe it. There was this beautiful woman, this young beautiful woman with the most beautiful complexion, the bluest of eyes and the greyest of hair. Not a squirrel, not a wolf, not a bear. A beautiful, beautiful woman. And they were married on Midsummer's Eve. And the marriage was fabulous. It was wonderful. Well, eventually it was time for the groom and the bride to find their own homes. You know, they couldn't all live in that small farmer's house. And the princess, she said, well, I have two homes. There is the castle that I grew up with, and there's the cottage that you found me in. Where should we live? She asked. And Hans thought, the castle might be filled with riches. But he told her that he wanted to live in the cottage where they met. And so they did. And I like to think that if they didn't live happily ever after, they lived contently ever after. The end. You ready for another story? Are you ready for another story? Alright. This is a shortened version of one that you may know already. Because normally what I do is like I have people mix up all the stuff and they roll everything out. But it doesn't really work very well on camera. It doesn't really work very well virtually. So we're going to do it just a little bit differently today. It's interesting trying to film these stories because when I'm live in front of an audience, I can have feedback from the audience. And I know if I'm going wrong or right, and there's this energy from the audience. Doing this virtual stuff is very, very different. Anyway, once upon a time there was an old lady and she was very, very hungry. And so she decided to make herself a snack. I guess she wasn't so hungry that she wanted to cook a whole meal, but she wanted something to eat. And so she got all the ingredients, eggs, butter, sugar, and mixed it all up. Molasses, fresh ginger, mixed it all up. You know what it was? You know what she was making, right? You do, don't you? Gingerbread! She got the rolling pin, rolled it out. She made the gingerbread boy shape. And she slipped it into the oven. Closed the oven door. Turn the timer on. Now I could do that for 20 minutes, but that would be really boring. Because that's how long it takes to bake that stuff. But she was sitting there at the table, oh, I can't wait for my little snack to come out. And all of a sudden the oven door crashed down and boing, out jumped the gingerbread boy. Hey, it's me, the gingerbread boy. Oh, there you are. Come here, I want to eat you. You are? You're going to eat me? Oh, yes, I am going to eat you. I made you for my snack. No way. Run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. Booby, booby, booby. And off the little gingerbread boy ran. The little old lady, she grabbed a cane. Oh, you little whippersnapper, you come right back here. And off she went after him. And the gingerbread boy, he ran and 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 he ran some more. And he ran past this house. This house had one of those beautiful big wraparound porches. And on the far side of that porch, there was this old three-legged dog. His name was Tripod. And there was this old three-legged dog fast asleep. But then he smelt something. What's this? He stood up and looked around and saw the gingerbread boy running past the house. Gingerbread boy, come here. What is it? Come here, come here. So the gingerbread boy, donk, 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 made his way over to the dog. You smell so nice. Oh, I do, don't I? Yes, you do. Come closer, come closer. I want to get a better smell of you. And I'd like to take a bite too. What? No way, you're not eating me. I ran away from an old lady. I can certainly run away from you. Run, run, as far as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. And the gingerbread boy took off. And he ran 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 some more. He did. And he kept running. And he came to this field. And in the field there was this old nag. Not your parents or a teacher, no. No. An old horse. And this old horse... What's that? Gingerbread boy, gingerbread boy. What is it? What is it? Do you have any sugar cubes on you? Well, I've got no pockets, no sugar cubes. Well, have you got any carrots on you? Well, no pockets, still no carrots. No, sorry. Come closer then. You smell absolutely gorgeous. I know. I do, don't I? Well, just as the gingerbread boy got close enough to the horse leant down and opened its big horsey mouth. And the gingerbread said, what are you doing? Well, I'm going to eat you up. You're a gingerbread boy. No way! Well, I ran away from an old lady. That's her right there. And I ran away from that hoppity dog over there called Tripod. I could certainly run away from you too, you long-eared, long-nosed, good-for-nothing old nag. And with that, the gingerbread boy shook his bottom in the horse's face and then took off. Well, of all the terrible things that anyone's ever said. Well, the horse knocked and knocked and knocked against the fence until part of it fell down and she jumped over what was left and galloped after the gingerbread boy. And the dog hollered after the horse, no, that's my gingerbread boy. And the little, it's my gingerbread boy, you leave him alone, I'm hungry, it's my snack. Off they went. And the gingerbread boy, can you do this with me? Well, he ran and 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 he ran some more. Until he came to a field. Nice job. Until he came to a field and the grass was tall. And the gingerbread boy was wading through it, running through it as best as he could because he's just a short little fellow. And he's running through the grass and everything and he comes across the riverbank. What's he going to do at the riverbank? I can't wade through there, I'll get my feet wet, and if my feet get wet, they'll get soggy and they'll fall off. You know what it's like when you dunk a cookie in a glass of milk? Well, it's the same with putting a gingerbread boy in a river. It's going to fall apart, it's going to disintegrate. Well, this fox stood up. Gingerbread boy, are you in any sort of trouble? No. What makes you think that? Well, I think it's those people that seem to be chasing after you and calling your name. Do you need to get across the river? Maybe. You got a way to get me across without my feet getting soggy? Well, I suppose if you climb on my tail, you can try. So the little gingerbread boy climbed on the fox's tail. And the fox started to walk into the water. Now there's this beach there, a little tiny beach, and the fox started to walk. It got deeper and deeper, but the fox's tail was sagging because of the weight of the gingerbread boy. And the gingerbread boy, my feet are getting soggy, you gotta get me higher up. Well, climb up onto my haunches then. That's kind of like where his hips were, right? And so the gingerbread boy, instead of being very careful and pulling himself up gently, do you think he did that? No! He just grabbed hold of the fur of the fox and pulled himself up. Oh! Well, you could have been a bit more gentle about that. Shut up and get me across the river. It's not a very nice thing to say, is it? No. So the fox is not very happy now as he's paddling across, but the current of the river, I don't know if you've ever swum in a river, it can be quite dangerous. The current can pull you down sometimes, and it pulled the fox down. And so the little gingerbread boy, his feet, even though he was on the haunches, on the hips of that fox, and my feet are getting soggy again. Well, climb up onto my shoulders, which are higher up, but please don't pull my hair. It was too late. The fox had his hair pulled, and there was a gingerbread boy sitting right on his shoulders. But his feet were still getting soggy. Well, climb up on my head then, but don't pull my... The gingerbread boy pulled the ears of the fox until he climbed on top of the fox's head. The fox was not at all happy. Thought Fox. This gingerbread boy does smell incredibly good and yummy. The gingerbread boy saw the people on the bank of the river. Can't catch it's me, me. And this gingerbread boy, said the fox, is very rude. And even though I had breakfast, a whole chicken, and one doesn't normally have dessert after breakfast, I think today I shall make an exception. And the fox bowed his head down, and just as the little gingerbread boy was about to slide off, he tossed his hair up into the air, and the gingerbread boy, wah! Down he went, and there was the fox with his mouth open. The end. Well, I hope you like that story. I think I've got time for another one, because when I was looking at my timer, it didn't seem that I'd had enough time to tell you a whole bunch of stories. So I'm going to find another story to tell you. Is that okay? Would you like one more? One more story? Okay, hold on. You ready for another story? I know I am. Alright. So outside it's raining. It's kind of a miserable day. But when this story happened all those years and years and years ago, it wasn't a miserable day at all. It was a gorgeous day. But it was middle of winter. No rain, just snow on the ground. King Mark, in Wales, King Mark, at least 200, 300, maybe 400 years ago, King Mark was having a huge feast. Now, King Mark was a good king. People loved him for who he was, because he treated everyone equally. The tall, as same as the small, the wide, as tall as the narrow. He treated everyone the same. The rich as the poor, everyone the same. And he wanted to make sure that the people that, he ruled survived. He wanted to make sure that they did well, that everyone prospered as best as they could. So twice a year he would hold a great festival. Now, he would hold a big festival in the middle of the summer to celebrate Midsummer's Eve, but he'd also hold a big festival in the middle of winter, because some people didn't always have great crops, and some people didn't always have a great deal of money, and he wanted to make sure that people survived through the winter. And so he would have a big feast. Everyone would be invited. Everyone from his kingdom would be invited, and those that had the least would take home the leftovers. Those that didn't have money, he'd give them work and pay them money, so they could afford to buy the things that they needed to get through the rest of the winter. Now, the winters in Wales aren't quite as harsh as the winters we have here in New England, but they're still long. People loved him for who he was. Now, at these festivals, these feasts that he would have, there would be many, many other people there, not just the people from the villages and the towns that surrounded the castle, but he would also have fire jugglers, fire breathers. He would have storytellers. But his favourite, other than the storytellers, of course, his favourite was this band of musicians led by a man called Enoch. And Enoch, he had a bit of an ego. Do you know what I mean by an ego? An ego it's when somebody thinks they're better than everybody else, that they know more than everybody else. That person has an ego. And Enoch was one of those types of people. When he arrived anywhere to perform, he wanted the sun to be either rising before him or setting behind him, so that when he walked in, he would look absolutely fabulous. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I didn't tell you about King Mark's problem. He had a problem. It wasn't a problem that you or I don't think have. I know I don't have that problem. He had large ears. I'm not talking about Prince Charles's large ears. No. Those are just like large ears, right? But King Mark, he had huge ears. They were the ears of a donkey. They were rough on the outside, but nice and soft on the inside. So when he was a baby, it was like having his own blanket. He could be like, he loved his ears. But his parents had died a long time ago, and the only person that knew about King Mark's huge, ginormous donkey ears was his barber. And you might wonder, why would the barber know this? Well, it's like the other day I cut my daughter's hair, because they're split ends, and it was getting all snarly at the bottom. And King Mark, he liked to grow his hair long so it would cover his ears, but he wanted the split ends taken. And every time he went to see Babbit the barber, he would lean in close and he would say, "Do not tell another living soul, or so much the worse for you." And Babbit would be like, "Okay, I swear I won't tell anyone. I promise I won't tell another living soul." And he never did. Now, this was a hard secret to keep. It wasn't one of those secrets that you can tell your friends and then it's okay, they won't mind me telling you. That's not a real secret. That's gossiping. And Babbit wasn't a gossiper. And he never told a living soul. But the problem with real secrets that you don't tell, they start off as tiny little grains. And then they turn into pebbles. And the pebbles turn into stones. And the stones turn into boulders. And the boulders turn into rocks. And then you can't sleep and you can't eat. And so Babbit went to see the doctor. And the doctor is like, "Oh, you have a secret. Tell me what the secret is and everything will be fine. You'll get to sleep. You'll have that whole weight off your shoulders." So, "No, I can't tell you because if I tell you, I'll lose my head. And I don't want to lose my head. I like my head right where it is." I know what you're talking about. Now, I have many people come to see me with all sorts of problems. I just don't want to even mention any of them. Now, I can't tell other people what those things are, because it's a trust that we have with our patients. So what I do, if I have something really bad that I need to tell someone and I cannot, then I'll go out into the wilds and I'll dig a hole in the ground and I'll whisper into the hole that particular secret. Now what you need to do, Babbit, is go outside. Go find somewhere nice and quiet, dig a hole in the ground and whisper that secret in your ears. "Oh, thanks so much." And he gave his sixpence. That's how much it cost to see the doctor in those days. Gave the doctor his sixpence and then he left. He went outside of the town, outside of the castle walls, until he came to the river, and he followed the river away because there's this big curve in the river, beautiful big curve in the river at Oxbow, and reeds grew up on this like beachy part, and he knew that the land would be soft there. Like I said, it was the middle of winter. So he made his way to this place and he dug a little hole. And he whispered into the hole, "King Mark's got donkey's ears." King Mark's got donkey's ears. King Mark's got donkey's ears. He checked the rushes to make sure that there was nobody there. He checked the reeds to make sure there was nobody there. He checked behind the trees, there was nobody there. "King Mark's got donkey's ears. King Mark's got donkey's ears." He jumped up and down, laughing so hard. Not at the fact that King Mark had donkey's ears, but because he told his secret and not to a living soul. And he felt so much better. That's why he was laughing. Oh, his heart was light. He felt good. It felt like this huge weight had been lifted off him. And he made his way back into town to where he lived. Now, we're getting to the point where the festival's about to happen, right? There's a few weeks later, Enoch with his friends, with his other musicians, Enoch had a fiddle player. She was an amazing fiddle player. And there was a bowron player as well. That's the drum that I play. Dung, 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 right? And they were travelling together, and they got to the castle walls, and they were like, "Oh, well, it's too early. The sun's still up in the sky." So they made their way to a place that they passed. A nice quiet place where they could practice their music. It was on the bend of a river, and there were some rushes and reeds there. And the fiddle player, she took a fiddle out and she's like, and then the drummer took his drum out, and then Enoch took his flute out. It was a reed flute, and he started to play it, except it was broken. What shall I do? Well, the fiddle player pointed, "There's reeds here, make a new one." Oh, yeah. And so he got his knife and he cut down a couple of reeds, and he got the best part of the reed and he cut that bit, and then he started to fashion the holes. But day doesn't last very long in the winter. And before he had finished both of them, they were pretty much finished, but he hadn't tested them properly. The sun was starting to get low. "We have to go, we have to go. So the sun is setting behind us. Come on, let's go, let's go, let's go." And so they ran up to the castle on the day of the feast. And the great hall doors, they swung open. And in walked the fiddle player. And And the drummer came in, and the king saw them come in. King Mark stood up and he says, "Oh, Enoch, you are here! You're here to grace us with your music. My heart sings with joy. It is good to have you here." Because Enoch was his favourite musician ever. And Enoch went into his pouch, took out one of the flutes, put it to his lips, and blew. But instead of a beautiful tune coming out, the words, "King Mark's got donkey's ears," came out. A hush fell over the hall. Now this hall was huge. There was a fireplace at one end, and there was a fireplace at the other. There were tapestries that hung upon the walls. There were these great flaming torches that lit the place. They were also along the walls. There was table upon table upon table upon table upon table. And then there was a high table at the back, where the king sat with all of his lords and ladies and his wife, the queen. Everybody had been eating and drinking. There was a fire juggler there. But when Enoch had played that tune, "King Mark's got donkey's ears," it went silent. Everybody turned and looked at Enoch. The king rose from his table. "What did you say?" "I never said anything, Your Majesty. I swear it was the flute. Look." And he put it to his lips again. And he blew. "King Mark's got donkey's ears." "Let me see that." Enoch bowed his head and made his way towards the king and handed the flute up to the king. The king put the musical instrument to his lips and blew. "King Mark's got..." "Where did you get this?" "Well, I made it myself." You made it yourself? "Then you shall lose your head." No, I swear it's not my fault. My flute was broken and I stopped just a little ways out of the castle walls, and there were two reeds that I made them into flute. "There's another one." "Yes, there's another one, Your Majesty. I'm so sorry." "Let me see." Enoch took the pipe out and handed it up to the king, and the king blew on it. "King Mark's up." Babak. King Mark turns to the warriors. "Bring me Babak. Now." The warriors made their way between the tables covered with food and drink. They pushed people out of the way until they grabbed hold of Babak and dragged him back to the high table where the king sat. "Babak, I told you never to tell my secret to a living soul. You two shall both lose your heads now." "But Your Majesty, I never told the living soul. I went to see my doctor because I was feeling so bad about it, Your Majesty, and I paid him my sixpence and I never told him a word. You're asking me, he's here somewhere, I'm sure. I never told a living soul. He told me to go to this quiet place where I could dig a hole in the ground and whisper the secret in the ground. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating. It was terrible, Your Majesty. So I went to the river where the big oxbow is, and I dug a hole next to the reeds and I blew into the ground and I said, 'King Mark's..." "That's what I said, Your Majesty, what you have already heard. I dare not repeat it." "That sounds like where I found my reeds to make my pipes." Somebody in the audience called out, "King Mark, show us your ears." This hall was huge. He didn't know where the sound came from. He didn't know who had called that out. "Who said that? Who said that?" And then somebody else called out, "King Mark, show us your ears." And then another, and another, and another, until everyone was calling out, "King, show us your ears, show us your ears." There was nothing that King Mark could do. He took off his crown and set it down on the table before him. He undid his bandana, which he had around his head to stop his ears from falling out. And then he shoved his fingers behind his ears, pushing the hair apart. And those great donkey's ears came down, rough and brown on the outside, nice and soft and silky on the inside. And the people in that hall began to cheer and clap. And at first King Mark thought they were making fun of him, but then he realised that they weren't. They weren't making fun of him at all. They were cheering for him. He realised that nobody cared about his big, long, furry ears with the soft pink inside. Nobody cared at all. What people cared about was what kind of person he was on the inside. And he was a good person. So there they all were, standing at their tables, cheering and applauding for King Mark. And King Mark, he never really liked long hair that much anyway. He had it cut shorter. And he had a new crown made, a crown with 2 holes in it, and he would pull his ears out through the crown, and he wore his ears proudly. Because, let's face it, he could have had a nose 4 feet long on the end of a pole with a wheel on the bottom so he could move around with his nose. But it's not your appearance that matters. It's what's inside that matters. And King Mark ruled for a good many years after that. And Enoch and the barber, because I don't want to leave them out, I don't want you wondering what happened to them, they were given a pension. King Mark paid them. Neither of them really had to work again, but Babbitt liked cutting hair, so he kept being a barber and cutting people's hair. And Enoch and his band, well, if you're a musician, you know, there's nothing to stop a musician from playing their musical instrument. And that's how it was with Enoch. And that's how it was all those years ago. Well, I'd like to say a massive thank you once again to Nashua Public Library for having me here on your screen. I hope you've enjoyed the stories. Now, these stories, none of these stories are my stories. All of these stories are really, really old stories. And they belong to everyone. I mean, Hans Christian Andersen, not so old. They were written in the 1800s, around the 1830s, around then, and later. But they're not my stories. They're everybody's stories. So if you like one of those stories, or if you like all of those stories, keep telling those stories. Because stories are meant to be told. And that's how you keep them alive. Thank you.